She hurled a 3-pound crystal award straight at the floor-to-ceiling window 42 stories above Philadelphia and screamed into the silence of an empty empire. The award didn't break. Neither did she. That was the problem. Rachel Hartley had conquered boardrooms, buried competitors, and built a billion-dollar company from a wheelchair. She had everything the world told her to want. And tonight, the night they called her the greatest CEO alive, she sat alone on a cold marble floor and whispered something she had never said out loud to another human being. Something that would change both their lives forever. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The plaque read, CEO of the Year. Rachel Hartley, Hartley Innovations. It was heavy. Real crystal, not the hollow kind they gave at cheap industry dinners. This one had weight to it, the kind of weight you feel in both hands when you lift it, the kind that's supposed to mean something. The engraving alone had cost more than most people's rent. Rachel turned it over in her hands once, twice. Then she threw it. Not across the room, not at the wall. She threw it directly at the window, the massive floor-to-ceiling glass panel that looked out over the entire Philadelphia skyline, where 1,000 tiny lights blinked below like stars that had given up on the sky and decided to settle for the earth instead. The award struck the glass with a sound like a gunshot and bounced back. It clattered across the marble floor and spun in a slow, almost mocking circle before coming to rest near the leg of her desk perfectly intact. Not a scratch, not a crack. The engraving still visible, her name still gleaming. Rachel stared at it. Of course, she said to no one. She had been alone in the office for 2 hours since the gala ended. The 42nd floor of the Hartley Tower was quiet in the way that only truly powerful places get quiet. Not peaceful, but vacant. Like a cathedral after the congregation leaves. All that grandeur and nowhere to put it. She moved her wheelchair closer to the window and pressed her palm flat against the glass. It was cold. Outside, the Delaware River caught the city lights and threw them back in broken pieces. It was objectively a beautiful view. She had paid a great deal of money to have that view, and she had spent the better part of 12 years barely looking at it. 47 years old. CEO of a company worth $2.3 billion. Named the most influential businesswoman in Pennsylvania 3 years running. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes Fortune and a magazine she didn't even subscribe to that had apparently decided she was important enough to feature without asking her. And tonight at the gala, when they handed her that award and the entire room stood and applauded, she had smiled her practice smile, the one that reached exactly far enough into her eyes to look genuine and said all the right things into the microphone. Gracious, determined, inspiring. She had thanked her team. She had talked about perseverance. She had made a joke about how the view from a wheelchair was different, but never lesser, and the crowd had laughed exactly the way crowds laugh when they're relieved that the person they're slightly uncomfortable around has made it easy for them. And then, she had come back here. To this office, to this window, to this silence. The award lay on the floor and glinted at her. You did it, it seemed to say. Now what? She didn't hear the knock at first. It was soft, the kind of knock a person makes when they're not sure they have the right to knock at all. 3 taps, then silence, then 2 more, almost apologetic. Rachel didn't move from the window. We're closed, she said, her voice flat. Not cruel, just finished. There was a pause, then. I know, I'm sorry. I saw the light on. She recognized the voice before she turned around. Evan Cole, project manager 3rd floor, 39 years old. She knew his file the way she knew every file in the building, not because she made a point of memorizing her employees, but because 3 months ago he had submitted a proposal for restructuring the Pacific Northwest distribution chain that was so unexpectedly brilliant. She had read it 4 times and then called his direct supervisor to ask very calmly why she hadn't heard this man's name before. The supervisor had said, "He keeps his head down." Rachel had thought, "That's a waste." She turned her wheelchair toward the door. Evan Cole stood in the doorway in a slightly loosened tie and a jacket that had clearly spent the last hour draped over a chair. He had the look of a man who had been about to leave keys in hand, mind already in his car, and had then done something that surprised even himself. He was not what people usually called commanding. He wasn't tall in the way that filled a room. But there was something steady about him, the way certain trees are steady, not because nothing has ever hit them, but because whatever has hit them has made them root deeper rather than topple. "Mr. Cole," Rachel said. "Ms. Hartley." He glanced at the Crystal Award on the floor. He didn't comment on it. "I was heading out and I saw your light. I wasn't sure if—" He stopped, started again. "Are you all right?" The question landed differently than she expected. People asked Rachel Hartley if she was all right, roughly the same way they asked if the weather was nice, a social placeholder, a verbal handshake. Something said before the real conversation started. Nobody actually waited for the answer. Evan was waiting for the answer. "I'm fine," she said. It came out with the automatic smoothness of 12 years of practice. Long night. The gala looked successful. It was. She moved back toward her desk, putting the familiar geography of the room between them the way she always did. Desk, distance, control. "You weren't there. I wasn't invited." Department managers below VP level weren't on the list, she said. Not apologetically, just factually, the way she said most things. "I know." He wasn't defensive about it. "I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I wasn't there, so I don't know how it went. But I saw your face when you came back in." That stopped her. She looked at him. "You saw me come back." "I was in the parking garage. You came through the side entrance." He paused. "You had the award in your lap, and you were looking at it like—" He seemed to search for the right word. "Like it had done something to you." Rachel said nothing. Evan took one step into the office. Just one. Like a man entering water 1 degree at a time. "I can go," he said quietly. "I should probably go. I don't know. I saw the light and I thought maybe—" He exhaled. "I don't actually have a good reason. I just thought someone should check." "Someone should check," Rachel repeated. "Yeah." She looked at him for a long moment. This was the part where she was supposed to say thank you for your concern. "Good night. See you Monday." She had said those words in various configurations to dozens of people over the years. It was easy. It was clean. It left no mess. She didn't say it. "Close the door," she said instead. Evan closed the door. He didn't come further into the office. He just stood near the wall like a man who had been given permission to be present, but not to impose. There was something careful about the way he took up space, as though he had learned at some point that taking up too much of it caused damage. Rachel studied him for a moment, then looked back at the window. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. 6 years. "And in 6 years you've never come to my floor?" "No." "Why tonight?" He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, it was slow and honest in the way that people are only honest when they've stopped trying to sound a particular way. "My daughter had a school play tonight," he said. 3rd grade. She was the narrator. She'd been practicing her lines for 3 weeks, walking around the apartment talking to the walls. He almost smiled, but it was the kind of almost smile that has grief in it. "I missed the first act. Traffic on the Schuylkill. I got there in time to see her take her bow, and she saw me in the back, and she just lit up. Like I'd been there the whole time." He stopped. "She's always like that. She never makes me feel like I failed her, even when I have." Rachel said nothing. She was watching the city. "I've been thinking about that a lot tonight," Evan continued. "On the drive back. How she just accepts things, the way kids do. They don't carry the scoreboard the way adults do." He paused. "Anyway, I was still thinking about it when I got here to grab my laptop, and I saw your light." "You thought about your daughter," Rachel said, "and then you thought about me." "I thought about people being alone," he said simply, "and whether they're okay with it." The room was very quiet. Rachel's hand was resting on the arm of her wheelchair. She became suddenly acutely aware of the weight of the award still on the floor across the room. The way it had bounced back. The way things she threw away had a habit of returning to her. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Evan." She paused. "Evan." The name felt strange in her mouth. Informal, like a door slightly ajar. "Do you know why I threw that award at the window tonight?" He looked at it on the floor. "I have a guess." "Tell me." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because it didn't feel like enough. And that scared you because you've been telling yourself for a long time that it would." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Rachel Hartley had experienced in years. She had been born with spinal muscular atrophy, the kind that showed up early and rewrote everything. She had been told at various points in her life by various well-meaning people what she could not do. She had made a private ledger of every one of those statements and had spent the next 4 decades methodically proving each one wrong. She had not done this for them. She had done it because proving things wrong was the one form of connection that never required her to be soft. Her father had been a proud man. Her mother had been a practical one. Neither of them had ever looked at Rachel with the thing she hated most, that particular softening of the eyes that people performed when they saw the wheelchair, a kind of involuntary dimming of their expectations, as though disability were contagious and proximity to it required a certain careful grief. Rachel had learned to answer that look before it fully formed. She had learned to be twice as sharp, twice as fast, twice as certain, so that by the time anyone's eyes had time to soften, she had already done something that made softness seem insulting. It had worked, spectacularly. In every professional arena she had ever entered, it had worked. It had cost her something, too. She had known this in the abstract, the way you know intellectually that a diet of pure ambition has nutritional gaps. But knowing a thing in the abstract and confronting it on a cold marble floor at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night were 2 separate categories of experience. "I have never," Rachel said slowly, "in my professional life, let anyone see me fail." Evan sat down on the floor. Not in a chair, not on the couch along the far wall. He sat down on the floor back against the wall, knees up like a man settling in for a conversation he intended to actually have. It was such a simple thing, such a strange, unremarkable thing, and it hit Rachel somewhere behind her sternum with the force of something she couldn't immediately name. He wasn't standing over her. He wasn't sitting at her level in a chair, which still created a kind of furniture-assisted hierarchy. He was below her eyeline, equal, maybe less. Nobody sat on her floor. "You haven't failed," he said from the floor. "I threw an award at a window. You threw it because it didn't mean what you needed it to mean. That's not failure, that's honesty." "In my world," Rachel said, "those 2 things are dangerously close. Maybe that's the problem with your world." She looked at him. There it was again, that quiet level quality. Not challenging, not provocative, just honest, the way a compass is honest. It doesn't tell you what you want to hear. It tells you where north is. "I don't have a personal life," she said. She wasn't sure why she said it. She said it the way you exhale something you've been holding too long, not because the moment is right, but because your lungs finally give out. "I have this company. I have this building. I have that apartment on Rittenhouse Square that I've had for 11 years, and I cannot tell you what color the walls are in the 2nd bedroom, because I have never once had a reason to go in there." She stopped. "That is what I have." Evan was quiet. "People admire me," she continued. Her voice had gone somewhere different, lower stripped of its boardroom precision. "I can see it, and I have worked for it, so I won't pretend it doesn't mean anything. But admiration is... She paused, searching. It's spectator sport. People watch you from a distance. They don't come close. They don't... She stopped again. They don't sit on your floor, Evan said. No, she said. They don't sit on my floor. The city moved outside the window. Sirens somewhere distant and brief. A plane crossing the dark sky blinking red and white. My wife died 3 years ago, Evan said. He didn't say it dramatically. He said it the way people say things that have been said so many times internally that they've gone smooth with handling. Breast cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Lily was 6. Rachel said nothing. She listened. I was so angry, he said. Not at anyone in particular, just angry. The kind of angry that doesn't have an address. I went back to work 2 weeks after the funeral because I didn't know what else to do with myself, and I threw myself into every project I could find because work was the only place where things made sense, where there were problems with solutions, where effort produced results. He looked down at his hands. Where I felt like I was still a person who could do things. Rachel was very still. I know it's not the same, he said. What you've built, what you've gone through, I'm not comparing. I just mean I understand the mechanism. The way you can turn yourself into work, because work asks less of you than life does. Work doesn't leave, Rachel said quietly. No, he agreed. It doesn't leave, but it also doesn't... He stopped. Choose you, she said. The words came out before she had authorized them. She heard them the moment they landed, the rawness of them, the nakedness, and she waited for the reflex that usually followed such moments, the withdrawal, the reframe, the pivot to something more controlled. The reflex didn't come. No one is going to choose me, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Not broken. Just bare. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like self-pity, and I have made it my life's work to never be that. But it is also just true. Men have looked at me my entire career the way people look at monuments. Impressed. Respectful. And then they go home to someone else. She looked at the window. I made myself a monument. You don't choose monuments. You visit them. Evan didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, Lily asked me once why I didn't have a girlfriend. Rachel turned slightly toward him. I told her I was busy, he said. And she said, Dad busy isn't a reason, it's an excuse. She's 8. He almost laughed. 8 years old and she already knows that. She sounds extraordinary. She is. His voice carried something in it that Rachel recognized only because she had observed it in others and never felt it herself, a fullness, a weight that was not heavy in the bad way, but in the way that anchors a person to something real. She's the reason I stopped being so angry. I couldn't figure out how to stop for myself, but I could figure out how to stop for her. Rachel looked at the award on the floor, at her name still gleaming. I don't know how to stop for anyone, she said. I've never had to. You don't have to know how, Evan said. You just have to want to. She looked at him. Really looked at him the way she looked at proposals and quarterly reports, with full attention. Nothing held back. He was looking back at her without the dimming, without the careful grief, without the spectator's careful distance. He was looking at her the way you look at a person. Just a person. Rachel Hartley, for the first time in longer than she could measure, did not immediately look away. The award lay on the floor between them. Philadelphia hummed below. And something in the room, in the cold, expensive, carefully constructed room, shifted in a direction neither of them had expected when the night began. Neither of them moved for a while after that. Evan stayed on the floor. Rachel stayed at the window. The city kept doing what cities do at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, moving, breathing, indifferent, and the two of them existed inside a silence that had somehow stopped being uncomfortable and become something else entirely. Something that had weight without being heavy. It was Rachel who spoke first. You should go home, she said. Your daughter. She's with my neighbor, Mrs. Petrov. She stays over sometimes. Lily calls her Grandma Pet. He said it without any particular urgency, which told Rachel that this was not an emergency situation requiring his departure. He had already made his calculation before he sat down on her floor. He had decided to stay. The realization moved through her in a way she didn't entirely know what to do with. You planned to stay, she said. I planned to check on you. The staying happened after. After what? He looked up at her. After you told the truth. Rachel turned away from the window. Not toward him exactly, more toward the center of the room, toward neutral ground the way countries meet at borders when they have something important to say and need to say it somewhere that doesn't belong to either side. I don't do that often, she said. Tell the truth. Tell it out loud. To another person. She moved her wheelchair slightly, a small restless motion. I have a therapist. I've had one for 9 years. I pay her a great deal of money to receive my truths in a soundproofed room and reflect them back at me in more bearable configurations. She paused. She's excellent. She's also entirely compensated to be there. It's a different thing. It is, Evan agreed. You're not compensated to be here. No. And yet here you are. And yet here I am, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. There was something she needed to understand about this man, not as an employee, not as the author of an impressive distribution proposal, but as a human being who had walked into her office and sat down on her floor and shown absolutely no signs of being frightened by what he found there. Why doesn't it bother you? She asked. He tilted his head slightly. What doesn't? She made a small gesture toward herself, toward the wheelchair, toward the whole assembled reality of her. This. Me. All of it. Most people manage about 4 minutes before the discomfort starts showing. They start talking too fast or too carefully. They laugh at the wrong moments. They look at their phones. She watched his face. You've been in this room for 20 minutes and you look like you're sitting in your own living room. Evan was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, it was careful, but not rehearsed. My wife was in a hospital bed for the last 4 months of her life, he said. After the second round of treatment didn't work, she came home, and then she went to a hospice facility, and I spent a lot of time in rooms where someone I loved was physically diminished in ways neither of us could do anything about. He paused. I think when you've sat with someone in that kind of helplessness, real helplessness, the kind that medicine can't fix, you stop confusing a wheelchair with helplessness. They're not the same thing. One is a situation. The other is a state of being. You've never been helpless a day in your life, Ms. Hartley? Rachel, she said. She heard herself say it and didn't take it back. Rachel, he repeated, quietly, like something being placed down carefully. She looked at the window. The reflection showed her the two of them, her at the window, him on the floor, and she thought it was possibly the most unusual image this office had ever contained. I have spent my entire adult life, she said, making certain that every person in every room I enter sees capability first, competence first, power first. She turned back toward him. Do you know what it is to perform strength for 30 years? I think I know a version of it, he said. It's exhausting. She said it plainly without any self-pity in it, the way you state a meteorological fact. It is genuinely, physically exhausting. And the thing about performing it for so long is that after a while, you can't tell the difference between the performance and the thing itself. You can't find the seam. She pressed 2 fingers to the space between her collarbones, a gesture she wasn't conscious of making. I am strong. I know I am. But I have been performing it for so long that the strength and the armor have become the same garment, and I cannot take one off without the other, and I don't... She stopped, breathed, continued. I don't know what's underneath anymore. Evan said nothing. He just listened. She understood watching him that he was good at this, the listening without filling. Most people filled silence the moment it appeared, rushed into it like water into a crack. He let it be. He let her find her own way to the end of a sentence without offering her an easier exit. "My mother used to say I had a gift," Rachel continued. "Not for business. She couldn't have cared less about business. She said I had a gift for making people comfortable with my discomfort. For taking the awkward thing and naming it before anyone else could flinch, and by naming it making it ordinary." She almost smiled. She was right. It served me well. I walk into a boardroom. I make one wry remark about the view from down here. The room exhales, and then we can get to work. Everybody's been spared the moment of not knowing how to behave. I've managed the social transaction so efficiently that no one ever has to think about it again. "But you still have to think about it," Evan said. "Every single time." He nodded slowly. It wasn't a nod of sympathy. It was the nod of a man filing something away, taking it seriously. "That's a tax," he said. "What you're describing. That's a tax you pay every time you enter a room, just so everyone else can feel comfortable enough to engage with you as a professional. You absorb the awkwardness so they don't have to. And you've been paying it for 30 years and nobody's ever acknowledged that it costs you anything." He paused. "That's not strength. That's an invisible labor nobody's ever thanked you for." The room was very quiet. Rachel looked at him with an expression she was fairly sure had never appeared on her face in a professional context. She didn't have a name for it immediately. It took her a moment to identify it as the particular quality of being understood, not praised, not admired, not assessed, but actually seen in the right dimensions. "You are," she said slowly, "not what I expected when I approved your hire 6 years ago." "What did you expect?" "I didn't think about it. I approved hundreds of hires that quarter." She paused. "I'm thinking about it now." He almost smiled. "I'll try not to be flattered by the timing." "Be whatever you like," she said. And then, because something in her chest was doing something unusual and she needed the conversation to keep moving forward or she would lose her nerve entirely. "Tell me about Lily." His whole face changed. It wasn't a dramatic change. Evan Cole was not a dramatic man. But there was an immediate and total alteration in the quality of his presence. A warming like a room when someone opens the door from the sunny side of the house. He became very suddenly more himself. "She's 8, he said. "Almost 9. She has her mother's laugh, loud and completely unself-conscious. The kind of laugh that makes strangers in restaurants turn around and smile without knowing why." He stopped briefly. "She's been doing that since she was 3. Laughing like the laugh belongs to the whole room, not just to her." "She sounds like her mother was wonderful," Rachel said. "She was." He said it simply, the grief folded into the sentence, but not overwhelming it. "Dana was. She was the person in our house who knew how to make everything feel like enough. I'm the one who worries whether we've done enough, saved enough, planned enough. Dana was the one who could look at a Tuesday night with takeout pizza and somehow make it feel like an event." He paused. "Lily has that. She makes everything feel like an event. Last week she declared that Thursday was a special day and that we needed to eat dinner outside on the fire escape with candles because the sky looked interesting. So we did." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know how she does it." "She learned it from someone," Rachel said. "From her mother." "Maybe. But her mother isn't there anymore, and Lily still does it. Which means she also learned it from watching someone carry on without their compass." She held his gaze. "That's you." Evan was quiet for a moment. "I don't feel like a compass most days," he said. "That's what makes you one." He looked at her, and there was something in the look, in the exact quality of his attention in that moment that Rachel recognized as a shift. Not romantic, not yet, not anything with a clear name, but a change in the nature of how he was looking at her, as though something he had filed under one category had just been moved to another. "I should ask you something," he said. "Go ahead." "The award." He glanced toward it on the floor. "What did you actually want it to feel like tonight when they gave it to you? What were you hoping for?" The question caught her somewhere undefended. She had been asked many questions in her life by journalists and analysts and board members and attorneys, and she had become very skilled at the art of answering questions while controlling the territory of the answer. This question left her no territory to control. "I don't know," she said. And then, because that wasn't quite honest enough, I wanted it to feel like a rival, like I could set something down. She looked at the award. "I've been running toward something my entire career. Not money, money came. Money's fine. Money is a measure, not a destination. Toward something more like proof. Like if I could just get far enough, do enough, build enough, I would finally be able to turn around and say, 'There, you see, you were wrong about what I was capable of.' And tonight, they gave me a room full of people saying exactly that. Standing ovation. Crystal trophy. And I stood at that podium." She stopped, corrected herself with the small private accuracy she had always maintained in language. "I sat at that podium and looked out at all those faces and felt nothing," Evan said quietly. "Not nothing," she corrected. "Something worse than nothing. I felt the absence of someone to look at." He didn't say anything. "All those faces," she said. "And I wanted one face. One person in that room who was there specifically for me. Not for the company. Not for the network. Not for the optics of being seen at an event where the woman everyone's talking about is giving a speech. One person who came because they wanted to see me win." She stopped. I couldn't find one. The silence that followed was the kind that settles, that stops resisting, and just becomes part of the room. Evan got up from the floor. Not abruptly, slowly, like a man who had given a space everything it deserved, and was now simply moving to the next position. He walked to the window and stood beside her wheelchair, looking out at the city, and for a minute, neither of them said anything at all. "I was angry at Dana for dying," he said finally. "I know that's irrational. I know cancer doesn't ask permission, and it doesn't respond to character assessments, and it didn't target her because anything was wrong with her or with us. But I was angry. For about a year, I was so angry at her for leaving that I could barely get through a Tuesday without something catching in my chest and just stopping me. In the middle of a grocery store. In the middle of a meeting." He pressed his hand lightly against the window, mirroring the gesture she had made earlier without knowing it. "And then one night Lily was sick, fever, the regular kind, nothing serious, and I was sitting on the edge of her bed at 2 a.m, putting a cold cloth on her forehead, and she opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and she said, 'Dad, you're here.' Not surprised, not relieved, just observing it. You're here. Like that was enough, like that was the whole thing." Rachel was watching his profile. The city caught the light in his eyes and broke it into pieces. "I stopped being angry after that night," he said. "Not because the grief went away. It didn't. It doesn't. But because Lily looked at me and saw the whole of what I was, right then, tired, scared, holding a wet cloth at 2 a.m, and she said, 'You're here,' like that was everything she needed." He turned to look at Rachel. "I've been trying to earn that ever since. To be worth that kind of certainty." Rachel held his gaze. "She already knows you are," she said. "I know. But I'm still trying. I think maybe you never stop trying when someone looks at you like that." He paused. "I think maybe that's what love actually is. Not the feeling, the trying." Rachel turned back to the window. She was aware of things happening in her that she didn't have the language for, yet things operating beneath the level of the articulate deeper than the place where her professional precision lived. She was aware that this conversation, this strange, unscheduled, completely improbable conversation on the 42nd floor of a building with her name on it, was doing something to the architecture of how she understood herself. "I've been so careful," she said quietly. "My whole life. I have been so enormously, deliberately, strategically careful not to need anyone. Because needing is..." She searched. "Needing is leverage. If you need someone, they have leverage over you. And leverage is the most dangerous thing you can give another person." "Who taught you that?" Evan asked. She thought about it. No one taught it. I learned it. I watched it happen to people who let themselves be soft in rooms where softness got punished." She paused. "And I decided very early that I would not be punishable." "That's not the same as not being hurt," he said. "No," she said. "It's not. You just made sure no one could see it when it happened." "Yes." He nodded. "I did the same thing after Dana died, for about 6 months. Kept the door shut, kept the face set, kept walking straight ahead, because if I stopped walking, I didn't trust myself to start again." He looked at her. "Until the night Lily said you're here. And I realized that the door I'd shut to keep the pain contained was the same door that kept everything else out too." He paused. "You can't curate what gets through. It's the same door." Rachel was quiet for a long time. Outside, a cloud moved across the moon, and for a moment, the river below them went dark before the city lights claimed it again. "I don't know how to open the door," she said finally. "I'm not sure I remember where the handle is." Evan looked at her, and then he said something she had not been expecting, something so simple and so quiet, that it arrived without warning and landed without armor. "You already opened it tonight," he said. "You've been standing in the doorway this whole time. I'm just the person who happened to be in the hall." Rachel Hartley had not cried in a professional setting in 22 years. She had built entire internal systems to prevent it, had developed reliable emotional detour routes around the moments that threatened it. She did not cry now. But something shifted in her face, some long-held tension releasing from a muscle she hadn't known was clenched, and she looked at Evan Cole in the quiet of her office at the top of her building, and she said, "Don't go yet." He didn't. He found the couch along the far wall and sat down properly this time, and she turned her wheelchair toward him, and they talked. Not about the company, not about the gala or the award or the things that had gone right or wrong in the last quarter. They talked the way people talk when they have accidentally wandered into a real conversation and decided to stay instead of retreat. He told her about the time Lily had tried to make him breakfast for Father's Day and had somehow set the dish towel on fire, and how they had laughed about it for 40 minutes on the kitchen floor. She told him haltingly at first, and then with more ease, about her mother's vegetable garden in South Philly, and the summer she was 14 and had decided to sell the tomatoes at the corner to make her first dollar, and how her mother had stood at the window watching her, and had not said a single word about whether it was possible or advisable, but had just watched with something in her face that Rachel now understood decades later to have been pride. He asked her what the company had looked like when she started it. She told him about a folding table and a rented office space in Fishtown and a laptop with a cracked hinge and a client who had told her in the middle of their first meeting that she might want to consider a business partner who could more effectively command a room. She told him what she had said back to that man. Evan laughed a real laugh, the kind that arrived without permission, and the sound of it in her office was something Rachel quietly held on to, the way you hold on to something you didn't know you were hungry for until it arrived. It was past midnight when he finally stood. "I have to get Lily from Mrs. Petrov's," he said. "She'll be asleep, but I always bring her home. She sleeps better in her own bed." "Of course," Rachel said. He picked up his jacket from where he'd laid it on the couch. At the door he paused. "For what it's worth," he said. "I think the award means something. I think everything you've built means something." He looked at her directly. "But I also think you already know the thing you actually needed to hear tonight wasn't in that speech they gave you." "What was it?" she asked, though some part of her already knew. "That you're someone worth showing up for," he said. "Not the CEO. Not the name on the building. You." He held her gaze for one long, steady moment. "Good night, Rachel." "Good night, Evan." He left. The door closed softly behind him. Rachel sat in the quiet for a long moment in the office with her name everywhere, and the award still on the floor, and the city still moving below. She felt something she hadn't felt in so long she had almost stopped believing it was available to her. She felt the particular fragile, terrifying warmth of having been chosen. Not for her power, not for her accomplishments, not for the tactical value of her proximity, just for being in the doorway, just for being there. She looked at the award on the floor for a long time. Then she wheeled over to it, picked it up, and set it on the corner of her desk. Not in the center, not displayed. Just set down. The way you set down something you've been carrying too long and have finally found a place to rest. She sat there until 2 in the morning, not working, not planning, not building anything, just thinking about a man who sat on her floor, about a little girl who made Thursdays into events, about a door she hadn't opened in 20 years that was apparently quietly already ajar. She didn't sleep that night. Not because anything was wrong exactly. Nothing was wrong. That was almost the problem. Rachel Hartley was accustomed to insomnia with a cause. Insomnia before a board meeting, before a quarterly report, before a negotiation with people who had spent months preparing to underestimate her. That kind of sleeplessness had purpose. It was productive in its way, the mind sharpening itself against a known stone. This was different. She lay in her apartment on Rittenhouse Square and stared at the ceiling and felt something she couldn't file or categorize or assign to a team with deliverables. She felt unsettled in the way that a snow globe is unsettled, not broken, not damaged. Just every familiar thing suspended in a medium it didn't normally move through. Floating in slow directions it didn't normally go. She thought about what Evan had said. Not the way she usually processed things, not analytically, not looking for the structural weakness in an argument, not preparing a counter. She just thought about it the way water thinks about a slope, following the grade of it, letting it go where it went. You're someone worth showing up for. She had heard thousands of compliments in her life. She had heard her own name attached to words like visionary and indomitable and formidable, and she had received all of them with the same practiced grace, the same measured nod. They had moved through her like light through glass, present brief, leaving no residue. That sentence stayed. She was still thinking about it when her alarm went off at 5:30. She was at her desk by 7. At 7:42, without entirely deciding to, she picked up her phone and pulled up the internal directory. She found his extension. She set the phone down. She picked it up again. She set it down again. She opened a quarterly report and read the same paragraph 3 times without retaining any of it. At 8:15, she called her assistant instead. Carol. She said, I need Evan Cole's schedule for this week. A pause. Carol had been her assistant for 8 years and possessed the professional discretion of a Swiss bank. She did not ask why. She simply said, I'll have it to you in 5 minutes. And she did. Rachel looked at the schedule. He had a project review at 9, a vendor call at 11, a team lunch on Wednesday. She looked at Wednesday. Then she looked at Thursday. Thursday was clear after 2. She typed an email. She deleted it. She typed it again. Mr. Cole Evan. I'd like to continue our conversation from Tuesday evening at your convenience. I realize that's an unusual request. You can say no. R.H. She read it 4 times. She sent it before she could revise it into something more controlled. His reply came 11 minutes later. Thursday at 2 works. Same floor EC. She read that twice. Same floor, she wrote back. Bring coffee. I'll order lunch. She put the phone down and felt something she was fairly certain was a smile moving across her face, and she let it stay there for exactly as long as it wanted to before her 9 o'clock arrived, and the day resumed its normal shape. The week moved the way weeks do when something has shifted in the middle of them. Everything looks the same from the outside, but you keep bumping into things you swore were further away. On Monday, she was in a meeting with 3 VPs and her general counsel, when someone made an offhand joke about the distribution chain in the Pacific Northwest, and she thought about the proposal, and then about the man who had written it, and she lost approximately 40 seconds of the meeting in a way that had never happened to her before. She recovered without anyone noticing. She was extremely good at recovering without anyone noticing, but the 40 seconds themselves startled her. On Tuesday, she passed his floor in the elevator and looked at the number without meaning to. On Wednesday, she called her therapist, Dr. Anita Voss, and said, "I need to move our appointment up." Anita, who had the calm of a woman who had heard everything and been surprised by very little, said, "I have Thursday morning at 8. I'll take it." She sat across from Anita in the clean, quiet office in Center City and said, "Something happened last week." And then she told her not all of it but enough. The gala, the award, the floor, the conversation, the 11 minutes before his reply. Anita listened. Then she said, "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," Rachel said immediately. Then, also something else, something I don't have the word for. "Try." Rachel thought about it. Like a window that I've been looking through for years suddenly opened, and the air coming in is the right temperature and the right smell, and my first instinct is to close it because I'm not accustomed to the draft. Anita wrote something on her notepad which she rarely did. "Rachel, can I say something direct? It's what I pay you for. You've spent 9 years in this room talking about connection as a theoretical concept. Something you observe in others, something you understand intellectually, something you believe in the way people believe in weather patterns in places they've never been." Anita set her pen down. "This is the first time you've come in here talking about a specific person in real time." Rachel looked at her. "He's an employee." "I know. There are 17 layers of professional complexity here." "I know that too. And I have known him for approximately 4 hours of actual conversation." "Also true." Anita looked at her steadily. "And yet here you are at 8 in the morning, which is not your scheduled appointment time, talking about the 11 minutes between sending an email and receiving a reply." She paused. "What does that tell you?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. She looked at the plant on the windowsill that had been in Anita's office for at least 6 years, and was, Rachel had always privately thought, an extraordinarily resilient specimen. "It tells me," she said slowly, "that I am considerably less in control of this than I would prefer." "Welcome to being human," Anita said not unkindly. "You've been resisting the membership for a while." Thursday came. At 1:58, Rachel's office phone rang. It was Carol. "Mr. Cole is in the lobby," Carol said. "He has coffee, and something that appears to be a paper bag from the place on Sansom Street." "Send him up." He arrived looking like a man who was not entirely sure what the dress code was for this particular category of meeting, and had therefore defaulted to slightly better than his usual Tuesday jacket, no tie, the careful presentation of someone who is trying without wanting to look like they're trying. He had 2 coffees and a paper bag from the sandwich place on Sansom Street, and an expression of composed calm that Rachel was beginning to understand was not the absence of nerves, but the management of them. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. It was the first time either of them had opened with just that, and the smallness of it felt enormous in a way that neither of them commented on. He set the coffee on her desk and sat down in the chair across from her. The proper chair, the one for meetings, and she thought about how different that was from Tuesday night, from the floor, from the way distance collapses when 2 people stop performing and then rebuilds itself in daylight and professional context. She was going to have to decide she understood which version of this she wanted. The professional distance or the doorway. She couldn't hold both. "Thank you for coming up," she said. "Thank you for asking." He handed her the coffee black, which she hadn't told him, but was correct, and looked at her with that steady quality she was coming to recognize as simply characteristic of him. "I wasn't sure what to expect from the email." "I wasn't sure what to write. The email went through several drafts." "I could tell," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "It had the tone of something that had been revised," he said. The first sentence had energy. The rest of it was careful. He looked at his own coffee. The first sentence was probably the true one. The first sentence was, "I'd like to continue our conversation," Rachel said. "Yeah," he said. "That's the true one." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about Tuesday night." "Me neither." "It concerns me," she said. "Professionally." "I understand that." "You report 4 levels down to someone who reports to someone who reports to my COO." She said it plainly. "That is a complicated architecture." "It is," he agreed. "I've thought about it." And he considered for a moment, and she appreciated that he considered, rather than immediately reassuring her. He took the concern seriously, which told her something important. "I think the architecture is complicated," he said. "I don't think it's impossible. I think it requires honesty about what this is and what it isn't, and I think it requires both of us deciding at some point whether the complication is worth it." He paused. "But I also think we're probably 3 conversations in, and deciding it's worth it or not worth it at 3 conversations is probably premature." 3 conversations, Rachel said. The distribution proposal Tuesday night and now. The distribution proposal wasn't really a conversation. "You talked to my supervisor." "I read it 4 times." He looked at her. "You read my proposal 4 times." It was an exceptional proposal. Something moved through his expression, not vanity, not the gratified preening of someone receiving professional praise. Something quieter. The particular look of a person who has been working carefully for a long time and has just received evidence that the work was seen. "Thank you," he said. "And then, why didn't you call me directly after you read it?" "Because it would have been unusual for me to contact a third-floor project manager directly." "You're the CEO. You can do whatever you want." "Technically. But I have spent 20 years building a culture where people are not afraid to work because they're afraid the CEO might materialize in their office at any moment." She almost smiled. "I maintain appropriate channels. Until Tuesday night." "Tuesday night," she said, "you showed up at my door." "I did," he acknowledged. He leaned forward slightly, forearms on his knees, and looked at her directly. "Rachel, can I ask you something that might be uncomfortable?" "Go ahead." "Are you afraid that this, whatever this is happening because Tuesday night was unusual? Because you were vulnerable in a way you're not normally, and I happened to be there, and now you've attached something to that that's really just gratitude for being witnessed?" The question was so precise, so exactly the question she had been circling herself, that it momentarily stopped her. She looked at him for a long moment. "I have considered that possibility," she said. "I've been considering it since approximately 7:42 Wednesday morning, when I found myself looking up your extension and then putting the phone down without dialing." She paused. "My therapist asked me a version of the same question this morning." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that I have been witnessed in my professional life on a daily basis for 20 years. I have been seen winning and seen losing and seen in rooms where significant decisions were being made. No one has ever made me feel the way that night made me feel." She looked at him steadily. "If it were merely about being witnessed, it would have happened before." He held her gaze. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay," she agreed. "So then, what is it?" "I think," she said carefully, "it is about being witnessed without the performance, without the armor, or the management, or the careful transaction of my discomfort into everyone else's ease. You sat on my floor, and you looked at me, and you talked to me like I was a person who happened to be having a hard night, not a symbol who had momentarily malfunctioned." She paused. "That is not something I have extensive prior experience with." Evan was quiet for a moment. Then he set his coffee down. "I want to tell you something," he said. "And I want you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way it might sound." "All right." "Whoa." "I went home Tuesday night, and I put Lily to bed, and she was half asleep, and she patted my hand the way she does, and I sat in her doorway for a while just watching her sleep." He stopped. "And I thought about you sitting in that office by yourself. And I felt something I hadn't felt since Dana, which was the specific and unreasonable and probably inadvisable desire to make sure a particular person was okay. Not in general, not as a category, a specific person. He met her eyes. That doesn't happen to me. I'm not someone it happens to quickly. Dana and I knew each other for 2 years before anything shifted. So I want to be honest with you, this scared me too. The room was very quiet. But you came on Thursday anyway, Rachel said. I came on Thursday anyway. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Lily asked you recently why you don't have a girlfriend. He blinked, surprised apparently that she had remembered. She did. What did you want to say? Not what you said. What did you want to say? He thought about it. She watched him actually think about it, which was different from watching someone construct an answer. I wanted to say, he said slowly, that it's not about being busy. It's about I don't know how to want someone at the same time as I'm terrified of losing them again. I know that's irrational. Loss is loss, it doesn't scale with prevention. But grief does something to your logic. It makes you think that not wanting is a form of protection. He paused, which is probably what Dana would have called very gently a load of garbage. Rachel almost laughed. The sound surprised her, coming out genuine, unguarded, landing in the room before she could shape it into something more considered. Evan looked at her like the sound had done something to him. She would have liked you, he said. The sentence arrived simply. Dana. She had no patience for what she called emotional cowardice, which was what she called it when people refused to go toward the thing they actually wanted because it required being brave. He stopped. She would have said I was being an emotional coward by not calling you myself instead of waiting for you to call. She sounds like she was very direct, Rachel said. She made me a better person, he said. I don't say that lightly. She genuinely, materially made me a better person, and I was angry at her for dying, and I also understand that having been loved well is something most people never get, and I am not going to waste it by staying closed. He looked at Rachel. That's what I've been telling myself. Lily helps, but I have to do it for myself too at some point. The lunch sat in the paper bag between them, forgotten. I want to ask you something, Rachel said. Ask. Would you bring Lily here sometime to the building? She stopped. Recalibrated. I'm not asking because of the building. I mean, somewhere. Would you introduce me to her? Something changed in his face. The warming again, but different now, more careful, more significant. Why? He asked. Not defensively, just wanting to understand. Because I think she sounds like someone I would like to know, Rachel said. And because... She stopped. The honest version of the reason was vulnerable in a way that made her want to find a more controlled expression of it. She found it anyway. Because you love her more than anything, and I would like to understand what you love. Evan looked at her for a long moment. You understand, he said, that if I introduce you to Lily, there is no easy version of what comes after. She is not a child who maintains casual acquaintances. She commits fully and without reservation, and she will talk about you for 3 weeks, and draw you pictures, and designate you a person who matters. He said it with the particular seriousness of a father who is not joking even slightly. I need you to understand that before we go there. Rachel held his gaze. I understand, she said. You're sure? Evan. She said his name the way she had learned to say it directly without the professional buffer. I am 57 years old. I have spent my entire adult life being careful. I am telling you clearly that I want to meet your daughter. I am aware of what I'm saying. He studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he was looking for, he apparently found it. Okay, he said. Okay. Saturday morning. There's a farmer's market on the square. She likes to pick out whatever looks strange and then look up whether it's edible when we get home. He looked at Rachel. It's not impressive. It's just a Saturday. It's a Saturday, Rachel said. I haven't had one of those in a long time. Something crossed his face. Not pity, nothing close to pity, but a kind of recognition, the kind that comes from understanding what it means to not have something simple. 11 o'clock, he said. Northwest corner of the market. She'll probably be wearing something that doesn't match. How will I know her? Rachel asked. He smiled. It was the fullest smile she had seen from him. Not the almost smile with the grief in it, but an actual unguarded smile, the kind that lives at the corner of the eyes. You'll know her, he said. She laughs like the laugh belongs to the whole room. Rachel looked at him and felt somewhere behind her sternum, the thing that had shifted on Tuesday night shift again further this time, further than she was accustomed to, further than her careful architecture had been designed to accommodate. She did not try to stop it. Saturday, she said. Saturday, he confirmed. He stayed for another hour. They ate the sandwiches from the paper bag and talked about the company, his genuine ideas about it. Not the careful ideas of a man performing for his boss, but the real observations of someone who had spent 6 years watching a machine operate and had thoughts about its moving parts. She listened, the way she listened when something was actually worth listening to fully, without the portion of her mind she usually held in reserve for her own response. At some point, the conversation moved somewhere else entirely, and she talked about her mother again, and he talked about Dana's parents, who still took Lily every other Sunday, and called him more than he expected, and were, he said, the reason he believed that grief could make people larger rather than smaller. She told him about the folding table in Fishtown, and he told her about his first day at the company when he had gotten off on the wrong floor and spent 6 minutes looking for his desk in a room full of accountants before someone had quietly redirected him. She laughed again. He looked at her again with that look. When he left, he paused at the door, the same pause as Tuesday, the same position, the geography of their exits already beginning to have a shape. I'm glad you sent the email, he said. I almost didn't. I know. He looked at her with a quiet certainty that settled in the room like something solid. But you did. He left. The door closed. Rachel sat at her desk and looked at the award in the corner where she had placed it, no longer on the floor, not quite displayed. Just resting. She looked at it for a moment, and then she looked at Saturday on her calendar, which she had blocked before he had even reached the elevator. Northwest corner. 11 o'clock. A farmer's market on the square. A little girl who laughed like the laugh belonged to the whole room. She had built a billion-dollar company. She had not once been nervous like this. She was nervous like this. She let it stay. She did not detour around it. She let it exist in the room with her in the office, with her name on the building, and the award in the corner, and the city moving below, and she thought, good. This is what it's supposed to feel like. This is the draft from the open window. Let it in. She let it in. She arrived at 10:53. She told herself it was because she was always early. Punctuality was a discipline she had maintained for 30 years, a professional reflex as automatic as breathing. But standing at the northwest corner of the farmer's market on Rittenhouse Square, watching vendors arrange vegetables and an older man tune a guitar nobody had asked him to play, she understood that this particular earliness had nothing to do with discipline. She had not been able to stay in the apartment any longer. She had been ready since 9:45, which was the earliest she had been ready for anything non-professional in recent memory and possibly ever. She had changed her outfit twice. That information would remain private. The market was busy in the unhurried way of Saturday mornings. People with canvas bags and coffee cups, children negotiating with parents over samples of honey and cheese dogs, being held back from the displays with varying degrees of success. It was loud in the bright and cheerful way that crowds are loud when nobody is under pressure. Rachel sat at the edge of it and watched and felt very precisely like an anthropologist who had been handed a field assignment in a civilization she had read about extensively but never visited. She heard Lily before she saw her. The laugh, exactly as described, exactly as promised, arrived from somewhere to the left, bright and total, and entirely uncurated, the laugh of someone who found something funny, and had no secondary concerns about the timing or volume or audience for that finding. Then a child's voice. "Dad, it looks like a brain, a purple brain. We have to get it. That's a kohlrabi lily. I don't care what it's called. It's a purple brain and we need it." Rachel turned. Evan was holding the kohlrabi in one hand and his daughter's hand in the other. And Lily was 8 years old and small for it, with Dana's dark hair that Evan had probably mentioned, and a bright yellow jacket over a green-striped shirt that confirmed his warning about the color coordination. She was pointing at the kohlrabi with the full-body conviction of someone who has just discovered an object essential to human happiness. And then Lily turned her head, and her eyes found Rachel, not with recognition, but with the open, direct, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't looking, and she said loudly enough for Rachel to hear, "Dad, is that her?" Evan looked up. He found Rachel across the small distance between them, and something in his face settled and opened at the same time, a quality she had been thinking about since Thursday afternoon and still didn't have precise language for. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's her." Lily looked at Rachel for exactly 2 more seconds with the seriousness of a child conducting an assessment. Then she pulled her hand free from Evan's and walked directly toward Rachel's wheelchair with the same purposeful stride she had apparently used for the kohlrabi. Immediate, decided, no preliminary orbit. She stopped in front of Rachel and said, "Hi, I'm Lily. My dad talks about you." Rachel looked at her, at the yellow jacket and the mismatched stripes and the dark hair and the absolutely fearless directness of her gaze. "Does he?" Rachel said. "Not a lot," Lily said with the honesty of someone who considers exaggeration a form of imprecision. "But the way he talks about small things is different from the way he talks about important things. And you're in the important category." She studied Rachel for one more moment. "I like your wheels." Rachel blinked. In 30 years, across hundreds of interactions through thousands of moments where people had negotiated the wheelchair with varying degrees of grace or failure, no one had ever said that to her. Not with that matter-of-fact, genuine, completely unsentimental appreciation. Not like it was simply a good feature of a person worth noting. "Thank you," Rachel said. And then, because Lily deserved the same honesty in return, "I like your jacket." Lily looked down at it and then back up with enormous satisfaction. "I know," she said. "It's very yellow." Evan arrived beside his daughter and gave Rachel the kind of look that said he had neither warned Lily what to say nor warned her not to say anything, and that whatever happened next was entirely his daughter's own invention. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Rachel said. "She told me I'm in the important category." "She's not wrong," he said. Lily had already turned back toward the vegetable table. "Can we get the purple brain now? And also, I think there's something weird over there that might be an alien fruit." "Alien fruit isn't a category, Lily." "It should be." She was already moving toward it. "Come on, both of you." "Both of you," said casually, the way children say things, that adults would spend an hour calibrating both of you, as though Rachel's presence beside her father was an obvious and unremarkable arrangement, as though the geometry of the 3 of them moving through a Saturday market was something that had always existed and only needed to be walked into. Rachel looked at Evan. He looked back at her with something quiet and careful in his expression, like a man watching something fragile being handled well and barely daring to breathe. "She does that," he said softly. "Does what?" "Makes things feel normal before you've had time to be nervous about them." Rachel turned back toward Lily, who was now interrogating a vendor about the origins of something large and spiky that the sign identified as a jackfruit, and felt the thing in her chest that had been tightening since Tuesday night release, slightly in the direction of something easier. "Come on," she said to Evan, and she moved her wheelchair forward into the market, into the noise and the morning and the ordinary, extraordinary Saturday of it all. They stayed for 2 hours. Lily bought the kohlrabi, and something she identified as definitely alien, and a small jar of hot honey that the vendor had let her taste on a cracker, and she ate the cracker with the solemnity of a judge rendering a verdict before announcing, "This is the best thing I've ever eaten. Dad, we need to put this on everything." "We're not putting hot honey on everything." "Not everything, just most things." She carried the bag herself with great seriousness, and at some point she had migrated to walking beside Rachel's wheelchair rather than beside her father, the way children rearrange themselves constantly, without apparent deliberation, following some internal navigation system that adults have lost access to. She asked Rachel questions without any social buffer around them. What did Rachel do for work? How did her chair work the controls of it? Could she go fast in it? Had she ever raced anyone? Did she live near here? Did she have pets? Did she like hot honey? Rachel answered all of them. She answered Lily the way she had answered Evan the first night, not with the managed version, not with the practiced public self, but with the actual answers. Yes, she lived near here. No pets because she traveled a lot and it didn't seem fair. She had not raced anyone in the wheelchair, but she had once used it to outpace a vice president in an airport during a delayed connection, and she had won. Lily found this outstanding. "You have to race Dad sometime," she said. "He runs in the mornings, but I think your wheels would be faster." "Lily," Evan said. "What? It's true. Physics, Dad." "That is not how physics works." "How does it work then?" He opened his mouth and then closed it, and Rachel watched the exact moment a man loses an argument to an 8-year-old and decides the dignified choice is to let it go. And she laughed, the real laugh, the unguarded one, that had surprised her twice already in Evan's presence, and was apparently becoming something she did now. Lily looked at the laugh with approval. "You have a good laugh," she said. "Thank you." "A lot of grown-ups laugh like they're checking if it's okay to," Lily said with the casual philosophical precision of a child who has observed the adult world for 8 years and found it somewhat puzzling. "Yours just comes out." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Someone very recently," she said, "told me I needed to let more things just come out." Lily nodded, as though this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Smart person." "He has his moments," Rachel said. Evan, walking on the other side of his daughter, looked at Rachel across the top of Lily's head, with an expression that she had to look away from, not because it was uncomfortable, but because it was the opposite of uncomfortable, and she needed a moment to accommodate the opposite of uncomfortable, because she had less practice with it. They found a bench at the edge of the square, Evan and Lily on the bench, Rachel beside them, and Lily ate half of Evan's coffee cake with the confidence of someone who has never been successfully denied, and Evan let her, and the three of them sat in the Saturday morning and were simply present in it. It was, Rachel thought, the most unproductive 2 hours she had spent in years. It was also the best 2 hours she had spent in years. She was turning that over, quietly examining it from different angles, the way she examined things that surprised her when Lily said, "My teacher says everyone needs 3 things. Someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for." Evan looked at his daughter. "When did your teacher say that?" "Last week. We were talking about what makes people happy." Lily was pulling apart a piece of coffee cake with total concentration. "I told her I had all 3. She asked me what I hoped for, and I said, I hoped we'd get a dog, and she said that counted." She looked up at her father. "Do you have all 3, Dad?" Evan was quiet for a moment. Rachel watched him choose his answer. "I'm working on it," he said. Lily considered this with the gravity it deserved. Then she turned to Rachel. "What about you?" Rachel looked at the little girl, at the yellow jacket and the crumbs on her chin, and the complete and total sincerity of the question. "I have something to do," Rachel said. "I've had that for a long time." She paused. "The other 2 I'm also working on." Lily nodded. "Dad says the important things take longer." "He's right. He usually is," Lily said with the generous magnanimity of someone conceding a point they don't actually contest. "Except about the hot honey. That he's wrong about." Evan rubbed a hand over his face and said into his palm, "We are absolutely not putting hot honey on everything." "We'll see," said Lily. Rachel looked at the two of them, this man and this child, this small and solid and real constellation of a family taking up a bench on a Saturday morning in Philadelphia, eating coffee cake and arguing about condiments, and felt something so large and unfamiliar move through her chest that she had to take a deliberate breath around it. She had built a company. She had moved markets and restructured divisions, and sat across from people who held significant power, and had not blinked. She had done all of it with the contained, precise, directed force of someone who understood what they were fighting for. She had never wanted anything the way she wanted to be part of this Saturday. The recognition of that was significant enough that she needed to look at something else for a moment, and she looked at the square and the people in it, and she breathed, and she let it be true. Lily at some point decided that Rachel needed to know what the kohlrabi actually was, and produced her phone with the authority of a researcher presenting findings, and read out very seriously that kohlrabi was a member of the wild cabbage family, and was eaten across northern Europe, and could be consumed raw or cooked, and was actually excellent. "See," she said to Evan, "it's not just a purple brain, it's a culturally significant purple brain." "That doesn't change what it looks like." "It doesn't have to look normal to be excellent," Lily said. And then in the way children arrive at profound things casually without intending to, on the way to something else entirely, she looked at Rachel and said, "Right." Rachel held the child's gaze. "Right," she said. Lily went back to her phone, satisfied. Evan did not look at Rachel immediately. He looked out at the square for a moment, and she could see him processing the small, precise weight of what his daughter had just said and not said. Then he looked at her. The look was quiet, not a statement, more like a question that had been forming for a while and had just found its final shape. She looked back at him and felt the question and understood it and did not look away. They hadn't talked about what any of this was. They had been circling the center of it for 2 weeks, with the careful instincts of people who understood that naming a thing changes it, and some things need to develop in the unnamed space before they can tolerate language. But sitting in the Saturday morning with Lily, reading nutritional facts about kohlrabi, and the guitar player, somewhere behind them, working through something that might have been a folk song, Rachel thought that maybe the unnamed space had done its work. She said quietly enough that only he would hear, "I'm glad I came." "So am I," he said. "I want to do this again." He held her gaze. "Saturday markets." "Saturdays," she said. "Whatever they look like." Something settled in his face, the particular settling of a person who has been holding something carefully and has just been told they can set it down. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." Lily looked up from her phone. "Are you two having a moment?" "No," said Evan. "You're definitely having a moment," Lily said with the calm confidence of a child who has decided she is right. "It's okay. I like her." She said it to Rachel directly with zero self-consciousness. "I like you. You're not fake." Rachel looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Some grown-ups talk to me like I'm little," Lily said. "Like I can't tell if they mean things. You mean things when you say them. I can tell." She went back to her phone. "Also, you laughed at the physics thing, and that was real laughing." Rachel looked at Evan. He spread his hand slightly, a gesture that said, "I have no authorship of this child. She arrived this way." Rachel looked back at Lily. "I like you too," she said. "You're not fake either." Lily smiled the full, unself-conscious smile of someone who finds this entirely reasonable. "I know," she said. "Mom said being real is the best thing a person can be." The sentence arrived quietly and settled in the air between the three of them with the particular weight that Dana always seemed to carry in this family's conversations, not as a wound, not as a shadow, but as a presence. Someone who had shaped this man and this child so thoroughly that she continued to speak through them without effort. Evan was very still for a moment. Rachel said carefully, "She was right." "She was mostly right about everything," Lily said. "Except she thought pineapple didn't belong on pizza, and that's just wrong." She considered. "But nobody's perfect." The grief and the love and the humor existed in the same sentence, and Lily delivered it without drama, the way she delivered everything as simply true as simply part of the world. And Rachel watched Evan close his eyes briefly and then open them, and she understood what it was to love someone who carries your person forward in the smallest, most unguarded ways without knowing they're doing it. Masek. They walked her back to her building at 12:30. Or rather, Evan walked, and Lily occasionally ran ahead and doubled back the way children mark territory in motion, and Rachel moved through the Saturday afternoon alongside them and felt there was no other word for it. She felt accompanied. It was not a feeling she was accustomed to. She had been escorted, she had been deferred to, she had been followed and managed and reported to and asked permission of. She had been in the company of people her entire professional life. She had not often been accompanied. At the entrance to her building, Lily hugged her. Without asking, without warning, without any of the social negotiations adults perform before physical contact. She simply stepped forward and put her arms around Rachel's neck. The way you put your arms around someone who belongs in the category of people you hug, and Rachel, who had not been hugged with that particular quality of uncomplicated certainty in so long that she could not have named the last time, brought one arm up and held the child briefly and carefully, the way you hold something you haven't held before and don't want to hold wrong. "See you next Saturday," Lily said against her shoulder. Rachel looked at Evan over the top of Lily's head. He was watching her with the full of his attention, not performing calm this time, not managing anything. Just watching with something open in his face, something that was asking the same question as his daughter, but understood it to be larger than a farmer's market. "See you next Saturday," Rachel said. Lily pulled back satisfied with this as a complete resolution and immediately turned to negotiate with her father about whether they were stopping for actual lunch on the way home or just finishing the coffee cake. Evan lingered one moment at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing up." "Thank you for the northwest corner," she said. He looked at her for a moment. The look said several things without saying any of them. Then he nodded once and turned to catch up with his daughter, who had already progressed half a block in the direction of what she had identified as a good lunch location. Rachel watched them from the entrance. This man in his jacket, walking beside this small girl in her yellow and green, who was gesturing as she talked, filling the entire sidewalk with herself, and she stayed watching until they turned the corner and were gone. Then she went inside. In the elevator, she pressed the button for the 42nd floor and then looked at her own hands in her lap for a moment. She thought about the purple brain kohlrabi. She thought about physics and wheels and hot honey on everything. She thought about a woman named Dana who had been real and a child who had inherited it completely. She thought about "See you next Saturday" and how easily it had come out of her, how it had not required revision or calibration or any of the architecture she usually required to say something true. The elevator reached the 42nd floor. She went to her office. She sat at her desk. She looked at the award in the corner, and then she looked at her calendar, and she did something she had not done in 12 years of running this company. She blocked every Saturday, all of them, the whole column. An indefinite hold, the kind you put on time when you have decided it belongs to something. Then she opened the distribution proposal, Evan's proposal, and read it again. The 5th time. And this time as she read it, she was not reading the work of an impressive unknown employee she had been meaning to elevate. She was reading the work of someone she was beginning to understand. And the difference between those two versions of reading was significant enough that she had to stop partway through and simply sit with it for a moment. He was good. Genuinely, specifically, carefully good. Not good in the generic way of competent professionals. Good in the way that came from paying close attention to the thing in front of you, from caring about the actual outcome rather than the impression of caring. Good in the way that didn't announce itself. She thought about what he had said on Thursday. I've been trying to earn it. To be worth that kind of certainty. She looked at the proposal. She thought about the floor, the 11 minutes, the northwest corner. She picked up her phone and called her COO. Monday morning, she said when he picked up. I need 30 minutes before the 9 o'clock. What's it about? Marcus asked. A promotion that's about 3 years overdue, she said. I'll send you the name. She hung up. She looked out at the city, her city, the one she had built toward for 30 years, and for the first time in a very long time, she did not feel like the only person in it. That was not a small thing. That was not a small thing at all. The promotion meeting on Monday morning lasted 22 minutes. Marcus Reyes, her COO, had been with Rachel for 11 years. He had watched her make decisions across a decade of growth and restructuring and market pressure, and he had learned to read the quality of her certainty, the way a sailor reads weather, not by what was said, but by the particular stillness before it. He sat across from her at 8:45 and listened to her lay out the case for elevating Evan Cole to Director of Strategic Operations, a role that had technically been vacant for 14 months since its previous occupant had retired, and Rachel had not found anyone she felt was worth the title. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a moment. This is the distribution proposal guy, he said. Yes. You read it 4 times. 5 times as of Saturday. She held his gaze evenly. He's the right person for the role, Marcus. The proposal is the public case. But I've also spoken with him at length, and I am telling you he sees this company the way I see it. Not the way people see it when they want to impress me. The way it actually is, and the way it could actually be. She paused. That's not common. Marcus studied her for a moment with the careful precision of a man who had been reading her for 11 years and was in the process of reading something new. Is there anything else I should know? He said, not accusatory, just thorough. Rachel met his gaze. He and I have developed a personal acquaintance outside of the professional context, she said. I am telling you directly because I don't operate through the back door on anything, and I am not going to start now. The promotion is on merit. The merit is real and documented, and will stand up to any scrutiny you want to apply to it. The personal element exists, and I am not concealing it. She paused. If you want to bring in HR for a framework conversation, I will support that. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I've been waiting 11 years for you to use the phrase personal acquaintance about another human being and mean it. Marcus, I'm being serious. He uncapped his pen. Let's talk about the role structure. They talked about the role structure. By 9:15 it was decided. By 9:30, Rachel's attorney had been looped in on disclosure protocol. By 10 o'clock, the thing was clean and documented, and handled with the same precision she applied to everything. Not because she was afraid, but because she had built her reputation on doing things right, and she was not about to compromise that now. Not for anything. Not even for this. Especially not for this. At 11 she called Evan. He picked up on the second ring. I need you to come to the 42nd floor, she said. This afternoon, 3 o'clock. This is a professional meeting, and I need you to know that before you come so you can make a clear decision. A pause. A professional meeting. Yes, an offer. A real one with documentation and HR involvement and everything done exactly the way it should be done. Another pause. I want to be clear that this offer exists entirely on the merit of your work, which I have now read 5 times, and which is frankly better than anything my current senior team has produced in the last 18 months. And I also want to be clear that I told Marcus this morning about our personal acquaintance, because I don't do things sideways. The silence on his end was the thinking kind. You told Marcus, he said. I told Marcus. How did that go? He said he'd been waiting 11 years for me to use the phrase personal acquaintance about a human being and mean it. A short breath on the line that was almost a laugh. I like Marcus. He's a good man. 3 o'clock, Evan. Think about it and come if you want the meeting. You can also decline and nothing changes professionally. I want that to be absolutely clear. Rachel. Yes. I'll be there at 3. She put the phone down and looked out the window at the city and felt the specific clean satisfaction of a person who has done a hard thing the right way. He came at 3. He sat across from her desk, not on the floor, not on the couch, but in the chair in the professional position, because they had both understood without discussing it that this particular hour required that geometry. Rachel laid out the role, the title, the compensation structure, the reporting chain, and how it had been reconfigured to address the conflict of interest appropriately. She was precise and complete, and gave him every piece of information a person needed to make an informed decision. When she finished, Evan was quiet for a moment. "You reconfigured the reporting chain," he said. "You'll report to Marcus directly, not through the existing line that connects to me. It creates a clean buffer." She paused. "I will not be your direct superior in any operational sense. I am still the CEO. But Marcus runs the day-to-day, and he will run you. That's a significant structural change." "It's the right structural change. I should have made it 14 months ago, when the role opened." She met his eyes. "I want you in this role because you're the right person for it. I want to do it correctly because anything worth doing is worth doing without the shadow of a question over it. Both things are true simultaneously." He looked at the offer letter on the desk between them. He looked at her. "Can I ask you something off the record?" he said. "There is no off the record between us," she said. "There's just us." Something shifted in his face at that. He absorbed it. Then, "Are you sure about this? Not the role, I mean all of it? Because once I sign that once this becomes official and people know it becomes a thing that exists in the world. People will talk. They always talk. And some of what they say is going to land on you in ways that I won't be able to deflect for you." Rachel looked at him steadily. "Evan," she said, "I have been managing what people say about me since I was 19 years old. I have never once adjusted my choices to accommodate other people's comfort with who I am." She paused. "I am not going to start now, and frankly, I'd suggest that you not want me to, because a version of me that makes herself smaller for public opinion is not a version of me that would interest either of us." He held her gaze. Something in his face moved through several things and arrived at certainty. "Fair point," he said. "Sign the letter, Evan." He picked up the pen. He signed it. He set the pen down and looked at her across the desk and said quietly, "For the record, I would have come back to that office on Tuesday night, regardless of any of this." "I know," she said. "That's why any of this exists." He looked at her with the full of his attention the way he had looked at her on the floor on the Thursday afternoon at the northwest corner. The look that did not dim. The look that saw the right dimensions. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she confirmed. Datang. The Saturdays accumulated. That was how Rachel thought about it later. Not as a relationship developing through dramatic moments, but as Saturdays accumulating one after another, each one adding to the weight of something real being built. Farmers markets became something else, something more. They found other Saturdays, other configurations. Lily's Saturday soccer games, where Rachel sat at the edge of the field and watched the child play with the same total commitment she brought to everything, and hollered encouragement that made nearby parents look over with expressions ranging from surprised to charmed. Saturday mornings in Rachel's apartment, which Lily had decided needed plants, and had therefore brought plants, 2 small ones that she had selected at the market with great seriousness, and positioned in the windows with the authority of a decorator who has been commissioned and intends to deliver. "This one goes here," Lily said, placing a small pothos on the windowsill, "because it needs the morning light, and this one goes here, the second plant, something with broad dark leaves that the vendor had assured them was unkillable on the bookshelf, because it needs to feel important." "Plants don't have feelings about importance," Evan said from the kitchen where he was making coffee in Rachel's apartment, with the easy familiarity of a man who has learned where the mugs are kept. "You don't know that," Lily said. I'm fairly confident. Dad is wrong about plants, Lily told Rachel in the tone of a woman sharing a long-established fact. I'll take your word for it, Rachel said. And she looked at the plant on the bookshelf in her apartment that used to be characterized by careful emptiness, and felt the particular texture of a life being gently populated by people who had decided without making a production of it that she was someone worth populating a life around. She called her mother that evening, her mother who was 78 and lived in South Philly, and had never once pretended to believe that Rachel's career was the same thing as Rachel's life. Listened to the whole account, the farmer's market, the plants, the kohlrabi, Lily's assessment of the morning light, and said when Rachel finished, she brought you plants. 2 of them. Baby, her mother said, that child has claimed you. Rachel held the phone and looked at the plant on the bookshelf. I know, she said. Are you happy? The question arrived simply. Her mother had always asked simple questions. Rachel had spent 40 years developing complex answers to them. This time, she said yes. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Good. That's the whole thing, you know. That's the whole thing right there. It was Lily who brought it up first. Of course it was Lily. It was a Sunday in November, 3 months after the farmer's market, and the 3 of them were in Evan's apartment, doing what Sundays in Evan's apartment had become comfortable, imprecise, ungoverned by agenda. Lily was at the kitchen table with a school project involving a poster board and an amount of glitter that Evan had already quietly assessed as catastrophic for the table surface. Evan was reading something on his laptop. Rachel had a document open on her own screen but had not looked at it in 40 minutes because Lily had been narrating her project aloud in the way she narrated most things, a continuous partially addressed broadcast meant for the room in general rather than any specific listener. Then, Lily put down her glitter and said, Rachel, what would you call yourself, like to other people? Rachel looked up from her screen. What do you mean? Like when I tell my friends about you. Lily picked up a red marker and considered it. Emma's mom asked who you were, and I didn't know what to say. I said you were important to us, but she wanted like a word. She looked up. What's the word? The apartment was very quiet. Evan had gone still at his laptop. He was not looking at Rachel. He was very carefully not looking at Rachel in the way that people try to remove themselves from a moment they don't want to crowd. Rachel looked at Lily, at the glitter and the poster board and the absolute, earnest, uncomplicated directness of the question. What word would you want to use? Rachel asked. Lily thought about it with the seriousness she brought to nutritional research and plant placement. I was thinking, Lily said slowly, that you're kind of like family, not like a relative, more like the person who's always going to be there, the kind you choose. She looked at Rachel. Is there a word for that? Rachel heard Evan exhale quietly across the room. She looked at Lily, this child in her Sunday clothes with glitter on her fingers, who had walked up to Rachel's wheelchair at a farmer's market and said, I like your wheels, and had not once in 3 months looked at Rachel with anything other than the complete and uncomplicated certainty that Rachel belonged in the room she was in. There might be, Rachel said carefully. Can I think about it? Lily nodded, satisfied with this as a process, and went back to her glitter. Later, when Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Rachel and Evan sat in the kitchen with the lights low and she said, I've been thinking about something. I could tell, he said. Since about 30 seconds after she asked me that question. She held her coffee cup in both hands. Evan, I want to ask you something, and I need you to hear it clearly. I'm listening. I want to adopt Lily. The kitchen was very quiet. Evan set his own cup down. He looked at her with the full, careful attention he brought to important things. He did not speak immediately, which was correct. This was not a sentence that deserved an immediate answer. Tell me what you mean, he said. I mean legally, formally. I've spoken with my attorney hypothetically without names, and it's possible in Pennsylvania with your consent as the parent of record for a non-married partner to pursue a second parent adoption in specific circumstances. She paused. I know we haven't talked about marriage. This isn't a backdoor proposal. This is a separate question, a question specifically about Lily, about what I want to be to her in a way that the word important doesn't cover. She held his gaze. She asked for a word. I want to give her a legal one. I want to be her family in every sense that can be made official and protected and real. Evan was looking at her with something she hadn't seen before, something that was past the quiet steadiness, past the careful management of what he felt. Something that was simply unguarded in the way the most significant things are unguarded, because there's no performance left to give them. Rachel, he said. I know what I'm asking, she said. I know it's large. I know it changes everything. But I have spent my entire life making large decisions, and I have learned to know the difference between the decisions I make from ambition and the decisions I make from... She stopped. Found it. From truth. This is the truest thing I've wanted in a very long time. Maybe ever. He was quiet for a long moment. She loves you, he said. I know. I love her too. She said it plainly, without the hedging or the careful architecture she might have built around it 3 months ago. I love her the way I haven't loved anything in a long time, which is without a plan or a strategy or any idea what I'm doing. I just love her. Evan looked at her. His eyes were doing something that required him to look at the table for a moment. Dana used to say, he said quietly, that the things worth having are the ones you don't know how to hold yet. The ones you have to figure out as you go. He looked up. She would have... He stopped, breathed, continued. She would have thought this was exactly right. She would have said the world needed more people who chose each other on purpose. Rachel held very still. I'm choosing on purpose, she said. Both of you. I want to be clear about that. This isn't only about Lily, it's about the whole thing, the whole constellation of you. I want in, all the way in. Evan reached across the table and put his hand over hers. It was a simple gesture. No particular drama, just a hand placed over another hand in a kitchen at midnight, in the quiet of a life being deliberately chosen. Ask me again, he said. She understood what he meant. She looked at him directly, without armor, without performance, without the managing of anyone's discomfort, including her own. I want to be Lily's family, she said. Legally completely for keeps, and I want to be yours. A pause. Will you let me? He held her gaze for a long, unbroken moment. Yes, he said. We both will. The adoption process took 7 months. Rachel learned things during those 7 months that no business school and no boardroom had taught her. She learned what it meant to fill out forms in which the categories did not quite fit your situation, and to fill them out anyway completely and honestly, until the situation was legible to the systems that needed to legible it. She learned the specific quality of patience required when something important is moving at the speed of institutions rather than the speed of your own will. She learned what it felt like to sit in a family court waiting room with a man she loved and a child who had brought her plants, and to be nervous in the way she had only been nervous once before at the very beginning at the folding table in Fishtown before anything existed and everything was still possible. She learned that Lily, when told formally what was happening, what the paperwork meant, what it would make official, had looked at Rachel with that direct, clear gaze and said, I already knew you were going to be mine. Rachel had held it together for approximately 4 more seconds before she had not. Evan had handed her a tissue with the practiced calm of a man who had seen his daughter reduce people to their essential selves before and considered it a feature. The finalization happened on a Tuesday in April. The judge was a woman in her 60s who had clearly done this many times and had not lost the understanding that it mattered. She looked at all 3 of them across the courtroom and said the things that needed to be said and signed the things that needed to be signed. And then she looked at Lily and said, Do you have anything you want to say? Lily, who had been waiting for precisely this invitation, with the patience of a child who has been told there will be a moment and has been holding her contribution ready, stood up straight and said, "I just want to say that I had one parent who loved me my whole life, and now I have two, and I think that's the best thing that's ever happened, except possibly the hot honey, which we now put on most things." The judge looked at Evan. Evan said, "It's a long story." The judge smiled and said, "Congratulations," and it was done. They went to dinner after the three of them at a restaurant Lily had chosen because it had what she described as a very serious dessert menu, which she considered the correct priority for a celebration. They sat in a booth and ordered too much food, and Lily narrated most of it with the completeness of a child who finds all of it equally significant, and Evan laughed at things she said with the full-body laugh Rachel had learned was the real one, the one that arrived without permission, and Rachel sat in the booth in a restaurant she had not chosen, and ate a dessert she would not have ordered, and was the word arrived simply without complication, happy. Not the abstract future tense happiness she had spent decades promising herself. Not the earned happiness of an award on a podium. The immediate specific present tense happiness of this booth. This Tuesday, this man and this child, this warm and imperfect and completely real life she had walked into one night through a door she'd almost forgotten how to open. Later, Lily fell asleep on the drive home, which she would deny in the morning with great dignity, and Evan drove and Rachel sat in the passenger seat in the quiet. "How do you feel?" he asked. She thought about it, really thought about it the way she had learned to think about things that deserved the full attention. "I feel like I've arrived somewhere," she said. "Not at the end of something, at the beginning, but the kind of beginning you recognize as real, not the kind you're always afraid might not last." She paused. "I feel like I can put something down." He reached over and took her hand the way he had in the kitchen 7 months ago. Simple, deliberate, without ceremony. "You can," he said. She looked out at the city moving past Philadelphia in April, the trees coming back, the lights of the buildings she had spent 30 years building toward, and she held his hand and listened to Lily breathe in the back seat, small and steady, and entirely hers. She thought about a crystal award on a cold floor and a woman who had everything the world told her to want and felt the absence of a single person in the room. She thought about a knock on a door and a man who sat on the floor. She thought about 11 minutes between an email sent and an answer received, and a northwest corner and a purple kohlrabi and 2 plants on a windowsill, and a child who said, "I already knew you were going to be mine." She thought about the door she had kept closed for so long that she had forgotten what the air felt like on the other side of it. And then she stopped thinking about all of it because the man she loved was driving her home, and the daughter she had chosen was asleep in the back seat, and the city was lit up and living and entirely present, and there was nothing left to think toward. There was only this. This was enough. This was Rachel Hartley finally understood sitting in a car on a Tuesday in April with her family around her. This was the only award that had ever been worth the weight of both hands. And unlike the one she had thrown at a window on the night everything changed, this one she would never set down.